Okay, let's have fun with budgeting. Um, we're going to mix it up a little. I think we'll probably break this up into two. Okay, so budgeting is something that you're all going to face or deal with some point. I guarantee it. You may not actually have to do a budget from start to finish, but you'll be part of a budget process. No question in my mind. Where do we start? Let's just kind of back up 30,000 feet. Budgeting ultimately is part of the planning process, right? So, at the highest level background of the planning process, we start with our strategic plan. And what is a strategic plan? Very simple. It's the organization's plan for how we execute the mission. Um, Mission statement, what's our reason for being? The vision is is a more tactical expression on how we achieve the mission, and the values are, you know, our guide in how we do these things. So I like the Mayo Clinic. I think really lines this up really nicely. We've got a nice mission, hope, promoting health, etc. You can read it yourself. How are we going to do that? What's our vision for accomplishing our mission? Transforming medicine to connect and cure as a global authority, etc. And then what values are we going to do, to accomplish that? What, how are we going to do that? So that's very broad background. Now we get the strategic plan components, organizational goals and objectives, our operational plan. These decisions drive the financial plan, right? What new programs or services, what the statistics tell us with respect to volume, payer mix, equipment needs, etc. The financial plan and slash budget. It's the financial representation of the operational plan. You're going to get that question um, in in the concept section. Um, for fair warning. So ultimately, that's what the budget is. It's a financial representation of the operational plan. We typically have, the operations budget. That's what we're going to talk about. That we'll talk about capital budgeting next. So that's typically like a 1 year time frame. Revenue expenses, and again expenses we talked about in the very first class, or second class maybe. It's the consumption of resources. So we're financial operations budget. We're focused on basically a 1 year time frame. We'll get into capital budgeting. That's major capital expenditures, things that have a longer lifespan. So they're not going to be quote unquote consumed within a year. Your buildings, your equipment, and things of that nature. They all go hand in hand, but we're going to focus on the operations budget. Okay, before I get that, I'm going to digress a little bit. I'm going to shoot to the appendix. I teach the 451 class in the executive program. So I just thought this is from a lecture. So we kind of already talked about this. We talked about the components of a strategic plan. I just thought I'd give a little talk about the planning process and steps. I thought it was important. I don't know if you had this in your class or not, but I just want everyone to be level set. So, yeah, again, there's a million ways to do this. You can read other books that do it differently. This is kind of my take on it. We validate the mission, organizational goals, and objectives, right? Are they still relevant in today's environment? Our senior management team, board of directors aligned. So I'm on the board of an insurance company. I'm not saying we do this level every year, but at least every 2 years we actually go someplace. We've been to Telluride. Um, have a little retreat, a little meeting. Um, Maybe play a little golf. Maybe do some hiking, things of that nature. Just kind of board retreat. I'm going to a board retreat. I guess by the time you get in this, I will have been on it. But usually, just kind of get away from things. And are these missions and values, are we still relevant? And the entity I still do part time work for, this kind of happens on an annual basis. This level, assess the external environment. You got your SWOT analysis. There's all sorts of things. What's and a lot of times we'll have an outside speaker come in. When I used to run a retreat, an annual retreat, to do strategic planning, I tried as much as I could to bring an outside speaker in, just get some different perspective. We're not all drinking our own Kool-Aid. What's out there, regulatory landscape, maybe, sometimes we brought in a lawyer or something like that. Clinical landscape, doctors are pretty much up to date on that. Brought in concepts like we demographics, the aging baby boomers. Certainly in orthopedics, that was a big issue. Um, so just what's going on outside of our own little bubble. Uh, Planning process, internal environment. What's our payer mix? Medical staff, our managed care. What are the key things? Technology, where we are with respect to technology. A number of years ago, um, this kind of topic got us from paper charts to EMR in the group. Um, Clinical technology, when I was at Northwestern as interim controller, proton therapy treatment center was set up. At one time, they were the only ones that had it in the market. I don't know where they are with that. But again, we're looking more internally, quality indicators, etc. And then, revisit the vision, the tactical, based on these things. Are we still circle back to that after assessing? So it can be an iterative process. Okay, then what are our goals with respect to achieving the mission and vision? Next step, what critical success factors to achieve our goals? They should align with the mission, value, goals, and etc. They should be actionable. I mean, it's not. I mean, this may be obvious, but if they're not actionable, why don't make them a critical success factor? And believe me, it sounds obvious, but I've seen it done. So gut check that. Are they measurable? Can we define these things? I mean, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? That's the old platitude. Are they critical in a literal sense? Are they really critical success factors? And believe me, you get a bunch of people in a room in a committee, they're going to have a lot of success factors that come up, but and not all of them are critical. I've always said in any business, and I'm probably oversimplifying it, there's probably only a handful of things that you really need to focus on to be successful. And I tend to think that there's maybe at times people just get overwhelmed and they're focusing on too many things. Um, I mean, in the practice world where I most recently came from, the physician, there's a lot try to complicate things with respect to marketing and things. You know what? Just be on time, take good clinical care of your patients, be responsive, spend time with them. Um, and that's gonna get you pretty much most of the way home. Um, and so I really do mean critical in a literal sense. What's really, really, really critical? You get too focused on too many things. You're just going to spread your focus. You're going to dilute it. Okay, operational planning. What are the specific action, resources, timelines to achieve everything we've talked about previously? Timelines, policies, and what are we going to do over the next 12 months? What policies or procedures do we need? New initiatives, new programs, um, resources, and get that statistics budget, which we're going to talk about. And then now we're back to the financial planning and the budget. So again, a little bit of a digression, but I do want to level set at least some amount here with, I mean, this is a whole lecture in my executive program course, but this is the essence of it. Okay, so now we've kind of level set a little bit. Let's talk about some budgeting things. Okie doke. So, they're detailed plans, right? Primarily expressed in these terms: volume, we got dollar rate metric rates and rate metrics. That'll be clear in a second. And the numbers, the dollars, net income, pro forma, budget income statement, uh, you know, probably a budget balance sheet, cash flow, all these things. That's kind of the essence of it. They may be developed and applied at any level with the organization aggregate, the organization as a whole, certainly by department. Your ICU, your emergency room, radiology, housekeeping, all the things. And then they can be defined by service line as well. So we kind of talked about that. You would roll that up. The orthopedic service line, the women's health is a service line, etc. You know, Perchance by employee, by customer. I love that idea. I mean, the list is long. It's endless. You can, especially with modern budgeting tools. The thing I want to emphasize, they're not financial staff tools. It's not solely a department. It's not solely a finance department tool. You really need to think about budgeting as a managerial tool to help people run their departments better. They're used for planning, break even analysis. Yay, let's throw a plug in that. What can we afford? Communication. This is what we expect of the management team or the results expressed obviously in dollars. Accountability. Hit your budget. Why are you over budget? Be accountable. Tell a story. We're going to talk about variance analysis. Internal control. Budgets are one of the main, what we CPAs call detective controls to find out if something's going wrong. I got two examples. We did a budget. Xyloflex is a medicine that used to treat, I think, carpal tunnel as opposed to surgery. Dissolves. Clinicians know better, but it's a medication that will dissolve the excess tissue or the scar tissue, etc. And it came out. I think we supposed to get reimbursed $3,500. The medicine itself was pretty expensive. We did a budget for it. This new program, we reported results against that budget, and we were volume was great, expenses were online, but our revenue was way low. Turns out that when the person entered it into our system, they entered I think $350 charge instead of $3,500. So we had billed some of this stuff out at $350 instead of $3,500. And if I've said it already, most of your managed care contracts are lower of contract or charges. So that hurt. But because we budgeted it, we caught the error, within a couple of months, and we were able to go fix the simple key punch error. So we detected an issue. When I was at University of Chicago, I was a CFO of all the outpatient activity, non-campus, and I did the first budget they'd ever done, and we did everything, et cetera, we were supposed to do, and then saw that pharmacy expense in one of the clinics was off the charts because we compared it to the budget. Now, turns out the administrator of that clinic was ordering birth control pills, and she was selling it kind of on the street, if you will, to friends and family. So University of Chicago was paying for it, and then she was stealing it and selling it to people. So we detected a fraud. So we detected an oops, we detected a fraud. Budgets are really good at detective controls if you do them right. Players, finance, obviously, the strategic we kind of talked about, reimbursement, your managed care team, your operations. That's probably what most of you will be involved with. Okay, annual typically we do these annually. Out year budgets, what the textbook means is if you do a multiple year budget, they're usually kind of wet fingers. Okie doke. Just some background, my history. So in 1985, I left kind of the public accounting consulting world, and I was hired at director of finance for a hospital. The budget was very top down. Literally, this guy, Mr. Gunderson, he did it in his office on paper, and the managers didn't really get any input. And the problem is if you haven't given your managers input, it's really hard to do variance analysis and accountability if they haven't any input, right? Why are you over budget? I'm over budget because Mr. Gunderson did the budget and never asked me what I needed. So anyway, I got in and I began to work the bottom up budget. I expected too much of I threw too much at the clinical team. They had never been trained. They had no spreadsheet skills. I kind of threw it at them. Maybe drink a little bit too much, drinking from the fire hose. They, I guess you could say they appreciated the fact that I was asking for their input, but I didn't really give them the tools. So then anyway, finally got it right, and we made I made peace with the clinical team, and we had a nice hybrid approach. I did more education. We still use kind of spreadsheets and some database program, but we got through it. And at the hospital was eventually sold to a national company, and they shut it down. We had a 20-year party once after the sale of the place, and I don't know, 400 or 500 people in the ballroom, and I spoke and talked about you know that interaction, and all the clinical folks and me we were friends, but the first 2 years was a little rough. So then I really didn't. I did a lot of budgeting, obviously, over the years. Then I returned back into the hospital world in 2006. I was interim controller at Northwestern, and I was in charge of getting the. Well, I wouldn't say that. That's too aggressive. I was a key player in getting the budget done. The budgeting person reported to me, but I he knew what he was doing. So let's give him the credit. And the great thing about the modern budgeting software, it really allows hybrid, multi-dimensional approaches in a very interactive way. And I actually sat next one of guys that helped develop this software. I actually sat we sat next to each other in the early 80s, and then he went off to help start this budgeting software company. So kudos to him. So it's really there's so much more transparency and visibility. Marketing drives managed care, drives volume, drives staffing and case management and everything. So it's really impressive what's been done over the years with budgeting to make it more interactive and multidimensional. And again, the whole purpose of this is to just kind of close the loop on the journey to if managers, and the lesson here is if the clinical managers or any even support department managers don't have input, aren't involved in the process, then the budget's a piece of paper. If you really want it to be a management tool, if you really want it to accomplish, to be a financial representation of the operational plan, you got to get people involved, and get their input. Okay, so let's talk about some things in the textbook. Conventional approach, base the budget on current year data, yeah, and sync up with the operational plan using a variety of estimation techniques, yeah. Zero based budgeting. So with zero based budgeting, you the theory is you just start from scratch, and I think the textbook kind of makes it either or. So zero based budgeting was all the rage at one time. You're going to justify everything from scratch, and you're just not going to take last year's, and you're going to have to justify every position. And the problem was this: it was so laborious, and you just kind of wound up back to the same place. I call it copy and paste justification. So it again, it was this. Some of these things come in wave. I think the theoretical folks that have never done a budget come up with these theoretical approaches. Oh, we're going to make you do everything from scratch, and justify everything. Well, how many times do you want an ICU manager to justify that, he or she needs two nurses per shift because it's a state regulation, right? And so it just kind of devolved into meaningless. I prefer the term zero based review, and we'll get into that. And we don't I don't consider them mutually exclusive dogmas on how to do a budget. I I I consider it more of a technique, and it depends on what area I'm budgeting. So I think the kind of important thing is at what level we budget a given line item. We'll explain that in a in a minute. Like there was a guy at Northwestern. I mean, I swear to God, he wanted to budget like pretty much every cup of coffee, every pencil, every pen. Ugh, you're killing me. And then how do we approach budgeting that line item? So, we don't need to budget every office supply. And then how do we budget? Do we do we do a zero-based review approach? Do we look at metrics, et cetera, et cetera? We're going to get into all that. It's good stuff. So, Dave's budget rules. I think these will be helpful if you ever have to do a budget. Think ahead. It's not just creating a piece of paper that's a budget. Think how best to use the budget as an effective planning and management tool. So, how am I going to use this budget? Rule number one. Rule number two, budget to the level of accountability. We're going to talk about variance reports. So, because that's really the 50% of the value of a budget is the variance reporting that you set yourself up for. Can you have a meaningful conversation about a variance, the difference between actual and budget results? So, for example, in the surgery center world, a lot of accounting firms that maybe are involved in budgeting or some finance don't necessarily haven't really run a surgery center. They just outsource the accounting function to them. They like to do budgets for by procedure, which is pretty classic way. This joint venture that I'm involved with, they hired an outside accounting firm before I got involved, and they did the classic budget by procedures. Well, I don't do it that way. I budget by surgeon. And the reason is I can't have a discussion with a procedure if there's a negative. We don't like that term. We'll learn about that in the future, an unfavorable variance, but we'll transition to that. So if I've budgeted just strictly by procedures and you know, I can't go talk to a procedure. If I budget by physician, surgeon, I can have a talk with the surgeon. So I'm not telling anyone what approach to use, but the thing is, budget to a level of accountability. Budget where you can have a discussion and hold people accountable. This is a related topic. Does the budget provide meaningful insight for variance analysis? Okay, I budget pair mix for the surgery center at a very global level. I don't do it by physician because I can't really control payer mix. I I um, I can't have a talk about Blue Cross Blue Shield about why my Blue Cross Blue Shield is down. Um, so I do it at a global level because it helps me kind of set rates and expectations, but I don't do it at a physician by payer mix level. So again, it all kind of ties up into the other things. Um, and we'll learn more about variance analysis, so it'll kind of loop back and tie in that in the next lesson. Okay, is the juice worth the squeeze? Okay, again, um, is the downstream reporting at a level that can be absorbed and understood? Again, I think I already gave this example. I budget office supplies. I do it pretty globally. Um, this one guy, I mean, you know what? You don't need to budget every cup of coffee in paperclip. And he was really pretty much, you got to see the forest from the trees. You got to see the trees. You don't necessarily need to see every leaf on the tree. Okay, so I don't do I don't do procedure by physician. I can go to a physician in the surgery center world, a surgeon, and I can say, how many cases do you think you're gonna do next year? You did 200 this year. Do you think you'll do 200 or better next year? And I'll get a response. Takes me a while, but I'll get a response, and I'll just assume, and I'll maybe say, do you think anything's going to shift? You're a total joint surgeon. You do knee scopes. You do total joints, knee scope. The supplies are pretty minimal. Reimbursements not, it's okay. Total joint supplies are, $5,000 6,000. Is it going to be about the same? Yeah, it's going to be about the same. That's good enough for me. If I say, how many total joints you're going to go next year, how many new scopes you're going to do next year, how many knee versus hip, they're not going to be happy. Um, so you want quality, and if you try to go too detailed, you know, yeah, not going to be good. Again, every situation's different. Pick the approach for each budget line item that best fits the line item. We'll talk about that in a second. And for big ticket complex items, I often use more than one approach. And we'll get into that in a second. So these are pretty good rules, I think, for how to budget. Okay, so approaches. So we're talking about number five, and to some extent number six. So the dollar rate per metric. Establish a dollar rate for a given metric. So per visit, per surgery, $300 per visit. Uh, you know, if you're doing it by surgical volume, total joint, we figure whatever, $18,000 per hip, $17,000 per knee, etc. So you're establishing some kind of a revenue or cost per this metric. This really helps me out with variance analysis, which we'll see in a second. So, example, $3,000 per case times 2,000 cases. Very simple. It's primarily a variable cost concept, right? If you go back to your cost structure lecture, schedule of commitments. Add up what you know. This is primarily fixed costs. Add up what you know to be your commitments for the next year. Rent, for example, leases. So I had a spreadsheet. I have a spread when I was doing on the practice side, I don't know how many offices we had. If I add them up, let's say we had 10 offices between physical therapy, MRI, clinical. I had a spreadsheet, all the, by office, leases, commitments, rate increases, common area maintenance costs, utilities, things of that nature. I just a schedule of here's what my expectation is. Schedule of commitments. Again, primarily fixed costs because they're not necessarily going to vary with volume. Leases. What leases have I signed? Are they paid quarterly? Are they paid monthly? Are they paid annually? How long do they last? Do they expire this year? Do they expire next year? Maintenance expense. I've got maintenance contracts. Again, are they paid monthly, quarterly? When do they expire? Zero based review. I call this kind of the step back and line item review. So I review the current cost structure and I just dive a little bit deeper. This can be super detailed or it can be cursory. So in the surgery centers, I kind of do this with staffing. I don't make them do a zero based budget approach, but we do. I go over it. I print out the current list of staff, and we go through it in some detail. So I'm okay. Has technology changed with respect to anything? Am I using disposable instruments or am I sterilizing them? That affects sterile processing labor costs. Do I have a new software system for pre-admission work that the patients are filling out a lot of this pre-admission history. So, X years ago, the nurse called, spent a half hour on the phone with the patient. Do you have diabetes? Do you have heart problems? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now they send them a link. Patient fills it out, and maybe there's even a video. When I had my hernia surgery, there was a video attached to it that was like, here's what to expect. So now a lot of that intake is already done, and now the nurse is just kind of going, okay, I see you did this. So now it's maybe a 15-minute call instead of a half an hour call. So do we need the same level of staffing? Again, technology. Has anything changed that would change our staffing needs? Ratio analysis is big. We establish a ratio of one line item to another line item. The classic is like payroll taxes or employee benefits as a ratio to staffing expenses. So when I do budgeting, my payroll tax budget's very simple. What's the ratio of payroll taxes I paid to my labor costs? Are there any tax increases forecasted? Yes or no? Benefits. I don't budget healthcare, workers' comp, et cetera, et cetera. I just look at a ratio. Okay, here's benefit insurance costs were 10% of salary last year. Talk to the insurance broker. Do we think rates are going to go up? Talk to my, in health insurance or workers' comp. What do we think? Okay, yeah, maybe it'll be 11% next year. That's ratio. And then cost accounting, good old cost accounting from way back when. A rate per at a fixed and variable component. I'll show you an example. I actually do some good old cost accounting. Contribution margin, yay. Okay, so let's talk about the first thing that we have to start with is the statistics budget. So those are the major budget assumptions that are primarily volume based, right? So the statistics and assumptions are crucial to the budgeting process. All these statistics that the marketing or operations people are given the finance people. Marketing, okay, what's our patient days going to go up? Admissions, length of stay, quality case management people. Do we have a goal to reduce length of stay? Marketing again, admissions, outpatient surgery. These these are statistics. What do we think? They drive the visits and RVUs and the number of physicians and the number of nurses and payer mix. Hey, we got a new in the surgery world. There's a lot of push to have employer direct, bypass the BUCA, Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna, BUCA. And I was CFO of a startup a couple years ago. Well, the business plan that I talked about in the first class that had all the errors. So I was short-term CFO for that. And their business model is they're trying to go direct from employers to providers by cutting out, the insurance company. So is there, hey, did we sign up with Dave's company and this new program, and what kind of business are we going to get from that? So this is where our friends thing one and thing two come in. In reality, it's thing one drives thing two, dot, 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 thing 300, right? But everything that we're going to talk about with budgeting is a mathematical relationship from thing one to thing two to thing three, etc. Okay, this is kind of this is Centellus is basically the company that the guy who sat next to me 40 plus years ago helped found it, and it does this cost accounting and budgeting. And so again, it's the same thing. You got your service line planning, your marketing, your strategic planning people. They project your volume. You got your utilization based on that volume. You divide it up by departments, potentially factor in some payer mix. What are the workload impacts? You know, drives your admission visits days. Got your inflation, reimbursement, et cetera, payer mix. Very broad overview. Okay. The key here is statistically driven planning model improves accuracy and efficiency. So you're integrating this Centellus platform with your accounting system and you're using statistically driven results. It's a fancy way of saying you got an accurate statistics budget. Okay, revenue. Revenue budget, we're combining volume data from the statistics budget with reimbursement expectations to forecast revenues. You can slice it and dice it a million ways. At the end of the day, it's almost always some kind of a rate times some kind of a volume. Okay, how do you determine at that level? I'll leave it to you. Do you do it individual procedure level, like number of MRIs? You do it at a macro level. Each thing is unique, but it's going to be some kind of a dollar per something. It could be dollar per member per month. It could be dollar per day. It could be dollar per DRG. We're going to focus on that. On the expense, okay, the revenue. Sorry. So for this is kind of how I do the budget for the surgery centers. So I've got my statistics. I've got the 2009 cases, right? I talk to the physicians. Okay, Doctor A, you gave me 208 this year. Can you get what can you do next year? Now this may seem kind of a little copy and paste, but it's pretty simple. I got a new physician starting. They're zero for 2019. I got a budget the new physician starting. I got a physician slowing down. There may be less. Maybe I got a physician that said, you know what, and I've had this. I've my shoulders wearing out. I need rotator cuff surgery. I'm going to be off for 3 months. I've had spine surgeons say, you know what, I need some work done on myself. From spine surgeons get the toll on their back is amazing. Ironic, I guess. I mean, these are real cases. I'm going to be off 3 months next year. You know, getting some laminectomy or maybe a fusion myself, rehabbing. So these are all things, the statistics. And then I have budget from statistical analysis that I do for that physician. Again, G is probably a spine doc, Q is probably a spine doc, B is probably a pain management. No, it's a pain management doctor. Low reimbursement per case. A is probably total joint, mixture of simple knee scopes and more expensive ones. C I can is probably a sports medicine doc again. So and then I it's very simple. I mean, pulling the data is another story, but I'm simply setting the revenue times the number of cases times a rate per case for the doctor and establishing my revenue. And again, we already kind of talked about this. I don't go any deeper than this because it gets to cost benefit and it gets to at some level you get to see so many leaves on the tree. It just be you can't remember driver's ed. I don't know if you were taught this way. If you look too far down the road, you'll drive the car off the road. And if you look too far in front of the, or if you like look at the road too close to the car, you'll always be making corrections. So you got to kind of find that sweet spot, looking ahead, where you just kind of your brain naturally steers the car on the highway without having to think about it. It's kind of the same. You just got to find that sweet spot for you where you can have meaningful downstream results or analysis. Excuse me. Textbook. Do. Yeah. Okay. Volume, rate, and variable and fixed. Yep. Uh, they're typically budgeted much more detailed level. Yeah, I would agree with that. There's more categories of expense and revenue. Uh, they're easier to control, I think, than revenue, right? I mean, you could talk to the ICU director about her costs, but you can't really she or he doesn't control revenue. Like, can't make me accountable for revenue. I just run the department and make sure the patients are taken care of and try to manage my costs. I don't, you know, I'm not in marketing. Again, price taker, loop back to that concept. So, what do we mean by general ledger category? If you're unsure of this, go back to the first lesson where I did the review of the financial statements. That's all something you should have base understanding of from 451, general ledger, chart of accounts. If you skipped over that and are now scratching your head, go back and watch that supplemental video. So here's what I mean. These are the general ledger expense codes for one of my surgery centers. And this is kind of the approach that I do. So, salaries, I use three approaches, and we'll talk about that. Payroll taxes, I just use a ratio. Benefits, a ratio to salary expense, and then I may up or lower that. Facilities, maintenance, repair, I do a step back and line item review. What I literally look at all the expenses and I say, okay, is this just normal kind of routine stuff, or did we repave the parking lot last year? So, and that was 50 grand. I'm not going to have it next year. So I do a step back and line item review. And again, a lot of it depends on the nature of the expense, but a lot of in the clinical world certainly I did a lot of it in the surgery center too. Rent, schedule of commitments, what's our lease, what's our CAM. Contract labor, I typically just do a rate per. I take an average contract labor per case times the number of cases. Are we going to use less or more? We have a discussion. Computer, I do a step back and line item review with the administrator. Did we buy a, did we, typically in the clinical world, I was on a, like every, I think 4 or 5 year, every 5 year replacement of all our computers, keep the technology refresh. Okay, did we buy any? Did we? Is there some reason this year had more or less expense? Do we need to do some more stuff next year? So I'm step back and line review. Medical supplies, pharmaceutical implants. I do rate per, but I do real cost accounting on those from our cost accounting system. Instruments, the same. Equipment and maintenance and repair is the same as facilities maintenance and repair. I'm looking at what I spent last year and were there, did I have a, did I have a, well, this year we had a HANA table go bad and we spent $20,000 to replace the computer board. Is that something that I need to budget for in the future? Or I'll tell you exactly what happened. The maintenance was so expensive, the maintenance contract, that we decided to go bare, and we got bit in the rear end. Uh, we were we had a board go out and it cost us 20 grand. So maybe next year we'll just go back and swallow it and buy the maintenance contract, and with Murphy's law, nothing will go wrong. And then the next year we'll be mad and we'll say we spent all this money on a maintenance contract and nothing went wrong, so we won't do it. And then the board will go out. The boards must know if we bought a maintenance contract or not. Equipment leases, schedule of commitments, what are my equipment leases, etc. Insurance liability. Uh, I generally do. Some people do a ratio, but it's really largely a fixed cost. So I don't really understand that. I generally look at our insurance needs for liability and general insurance, not benefit insurance. So I'm talking, the covering the physical liability is, you know, med mal, and then the general is, the usual stuff. Water main break, somebody slips and falls, etc. Laundry and linen, average per case, post and delivery, a dollar per case, transcription, etc. Management fees, schedule of commitments. Did we have a joint commission review last year? So I paid for some consultants. Do we have one next year? We usually bring in this one consultant to help us. Okay, accounting fees the same. Billing expense, I do a ratio of prior year. Billing expense to revenue. Legal fees, step back and review. Again, schedule of commitments with on-site. That's where the credential. Credentialing. Are we going to outsource it? Are we going to take it in? Et cetera, et cetera. Meetings. Every 2 years, we do a blowout party. So you know, and professional development. You're going to send anyone to a seminar, et cetera, et cetera. Office supplies, printing. I think we talked about that. Um, yeah, I just do it per case. I don't budget paper clips. Telephone, I do a step back because technology changes so rapidly. Utilities, I kind of do. Um, Probably a little anal on my part. Um, I can't control it anyway, right? I can't control the weather. Meals and entertainment, I guess that sorry, that's the party. Um, the meetings is more professional development. Yeah, the meals and entertainment. What did we spend? Miscellaneous expense. This looks odd. I do a goofy thing. I put our rebates in miscellaneous expense. It's a whole other thing, not really relevant for the class, but I look at what we spent, etc. Okay, so I think you get the picture. Depreciation, I call it scheduled commitments. We look at the fixed asset schedule beyond the scope of this class. Um, and we just look at our depreciation schedule, and then new equipment. Are we buying? What's coming on to be depreciated? What's going off? Taxes ratio. Okay, this is where I do a contribution margin approach on revenue. So this should be familiar. I actually I have my expected reimbursement for case, my variable supplies. I don't and implants. I don't variable cost labor, and I have a contribution margin per case by physician, and then I multiply it and I get contribution margin. So I do use it. I didn't want you to think that I just taught you it for theoretical reasons. I look at contribution margin level for the surgery centers. And so it helps me. I mean, we're past the point of break even, but I can tell you we bought a surgery center a couple years ago, and we did it from scratch. I mean, we all the physicians that were going there, they were dually physicians for the most part. They left. So we did a break even analysis on this surgery center. What volume do we need to do to have this thing break even? So whenever you can do contribution margin, I do suggest using it. Okay, for staffing, I do three approaches because it's such a big line item. I do a step back and line item review, the zero based review. Again, I think I referred to that. I sit with the administrator and we look at the roster of staff, project a raise, project some bonus, no vacancy rate. In other words, I budget, I assume there's no vacant open positions. So when I did at the hospital, we factored in our staffing at any given time. There's going to be so much vacancies, and the HR director was pretty anal, great guy, anal retentive guy. So we would budget a little vacancy rate. I don't budget a vacancy rate. If I if I have an open position, chances are I'm going to pay overtime to fill, to cover that case, or maybe I'm going to bring in agency nurses if it's clinical. So then I do a run rate. I just say, okay, I spent this much September to November. That's 91 days. Cost per calendar day was 78.20. It's a leap year. This year, I multiply the cost per day. Do the same thing with the raise. I do the bonus. I get another perspective. Now, the reason that this is going to run under this, the run rate's going to run under the employee roster, is because of this no vacancy rate issue. Because I do, in fact, have vacancy. And some of it, people just work harder. But again, I'm doing three perspectives. So this is a rate per day. And then I do a cost accounting approach where I say this was my basic cost. I subtract what I consider my fixed costs from the office and administrative. Then I get my clinical staff and I divide that into fixed and variable components. And then I take those fixed components to the budget, fixed administrative, fixed clinical. I mean, your PAT nurses or your, right, they're pretty much fixed. A lot of your nursing staff is fixed. Your supervisors, your charge nurses, uh, and you got 10 cases that day or 20, you still got your charge nurse, your OR charge, your PAT, your PACU charge nurse, right? Your some level, your sterile processing supervisor. And so then what I do is I try to arrive at a variable cost per case rate, apply that to the budget. I get so this is a fixed component, variable cost component, add them together, throw in my bonus. I think I have. Did I do? I think I adjusted the. Yeah, the per case cost is adjusted with the raise, and I have three different views, and then I have some kind of average, and that's usually what I do. Probably overkill, but I like coming at it from three different perspectives. Okay, we're going to stop here. It's an hour, and then we're going to do a second video to just show an example to apply it. Okay, but what we're trying to get to is a P&L. So take a pause, and we'll do a second video.